The call came through at 2:47 a.m., pulling Dr. Marcus Webb from the first decent sleep he'd had in weeks. His phone vibrated against the nightstand in his cabin outside Forks, Washington, the screen casting pale light across pine walls. "Marcus, it's Deputy Chen. We need you at the logging access road off Route 101. Bring your field kit. And Marcus, come alone." The urgency in Sarah Chen's voice bypassed his drowsiness. Marcus had worked with the Olympic National Forest Rangers for 5 years, providing veterinary care for injured wildlife. Black bears with porcupine quills, elk tangled in fence wire, occasionally a cougar hit by a logging truck. But Sarah's tone carried something else tonight. Fear, perhaps, or wonder. He dressed quickly. Thermal layers, waterproof shell, boots still damp from yesterday's rain. October in the Pacific Northwest meant cold that seeped into bones, mist that obscured vision, and forest sounds that could unsettle even seasoned outdoorsmen. Marcus loaded his Tacoma with the field kit, sutures, antibiotics, tranquilizers, plasma expanders, and drove through pre-dawn darkness, headlights carving tunnels through fog that rolled off the Pacific like living vapor. The access road was barely more than tire ruts through second-growth forest. Marcus spotted Sarah's patrol vehicle first, then her silhouette against the portable floodlight she'd rigged. She stood beside something covered with a silver emergency blanket, her breath making clouds in the beam. "You're going to want to see this first," Sarah said quietly, pulling back the blanket. Marcus knelt, his medical training overriding shock. The creature before him was unmistakably injured. A deep laceration across its left shoulder, possibly from barbed wire or a vehicle collision. But the patient itself defied every taxonomy he'd memorized in veterinary school. Approximately 4 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown hair, matted with blood and forest debris. The facial structure was profoundly disturbing in its familiarity. Prominent brow ridge, deeply set eyes currently closed, nose broad and flat. Jaw prognathous, but not ursine. The hands, he found himself thinking of them as hands, not paws, possessed an opposable thumb, though the fingers were longer and more robust than human proportions. The feet were massive, easily size 14 equivalent, with a mid-tarsal break, visible even to his untrained anthropological eye. "Found it 2 hours ago," Sarah whispered. "Logging crew reported seeing something big crossing the road. When I arrived, it was trying to climb back into the forest. Collapsed about 20 yards in." "Marcus, I've seen bears. I've seen elk. This is neither." Marcus opened his kit with trembling hands. Protocol. Focus on protocol. Assess airway, breathing, circulation. The creature's breathing was labored but rhythmic, approximately 14 breaths per minute. He gently palpated the chest, warm, heart rate elevated but strong, maybe 90 beats per minute. The wound across the shoulder was deep, exposing muscle tissue, but no arterial bleeding. Good. He administered a field block with lidocaine, expecting resistance, but the creature only flinched slightly. Its eyes opened, amber-brown, with sclera visible, tracking Marcus's movements with unmistakable intelligence. Not the flat predator gaze of a bear, not the panicked prey stare of a deer, something that assessed, calculated, and chose not to flee. "Easy," Marcus murmured, the same tone he used with frightened animals. "I'm trying to help." He irrigated the wound with sterile saline, watching for reaction. The creature's right hand gripped a root beside its body, knuckles whitening, pain response. Controlled. Marcus began suturing, his headlamp illuminating subcutaneous tissue that looked disturbingly similar to human anatomy texts. Layers of fascia, muscle fiber arranged in familiar patterns, blood that coagulated at human rates. As he worked, Marcus conducted a mental inventory of impossibilities. Body temperature approximately 98.6 degrees Celsius, based on the infrared thermometer. Dentition visible when the creature grimaced, molars adapted for grinding, canines present but not dramatically pronounced, pattern consistent with omnivorous diet, dermatoglyphics on the palmar surface, fingerprints, distinct whorls and loops. "We need to move it somewhere secure," Sarah said, scanning the forest. "Logging crew starts at 6 a.m. If they see this, if anyone sees this—" "My research station," Marcus heard himself say. "The old Forest Service cabin. It's been decommissioned for 2 years, but I still have the keys. Nobody goes there." They improvised a transport. Sarah's patrol blanket fashioned into a stretcher. Marcus at the head, Sarah at the feet. The creature weighed perhaps 200 pounds, dense muscle over a compact frame. During the half-mile carry to Marcus's truck, its eyes never left his face, watching, judging. The cabin was isolated. 3 miles down a fire road, solar panels on the roof, providing enough power for lights and a small refrigerator. Marcus had used it for wildlife rehabilitation before budget cuts. Now he laid the creature on the examination table he'd built for sedated bears, adjusting the flood lamp. "I'm calling this in," Sarah said, pulling out her phone. "To whom?" Marcus challenged. "Fish and Wildlife. They'll want federal agencies. Federal agencies mean seizure, transport to some facility, media circus." "Sarah, look at it. Really look." She did. The creature had turned its head toward them, following the conversation despite obvious pain. One hand lay palm up on the table, fingers curling and uncurling in what might have been distress or communication. "It understands us," Sarah breathed. "I think so, or at least recognizes that we're communicating." Marcus approached slowly, keeping his movements visible. The creature's gaze tracked him. He held up a water bottle, mimed drinking. After a moment, the creature nodded, a tiny, unmistakable nod. Marcus held the bottle to those 2 human lips. The creature drank carefully, throat working, eyes closing briefly in what might have been relief or gratitude. When finished, it made a sound, low, modulated, almost interrogative in tone. "I don't know what you're asking," Marcus said softly, "but you're safe here. I promise you're safe." The creature's breathing slowed, steadied, whether from the analgesic finally taking effect or from some decision made in that unreadable mind, Marcus couldn't tell. But the amber eyes held his for a long moment before closing, and the hand that had been clenched relaxed. Sarah paced the small cabin, her training warring with her conscience. "This breaks every protocol. If Sheriff Holbrook finds out I didn't report this immediately, then we don't tell him," Marcus said. "Not yet. Sarah, we have something here that science said couldn't exist. Something that's clearly intelligent, possibly even sapient. If we report this wrong, if we trigger the wrong response, we might lose the only chance we'll ever have to understand, to establish contact." "Establish contact," Sarah repeated. "Listen to yourself. 24 hours ago, you would have called anyone talking like this a conspiracy theorist. 24 hours ago, I had never seen this." Marcus gestured at the sleeping creature. "Now I have, and my responsibility, our responsibility, is to do no harm. That's the first principle. Primum non nocere." Sarah stared at the creature for a long time. Finally, she nodded. 72 hours. "That's all I can give you without filing a report. If Sheriff Holbrook asks why I was out on the logging road, I'll say I was following up on a poaching tip. But Marcus, in 3 days, we need a plan, because we can't keep this secret forever." After Sarah left, Marcus sat in the cabin's only chair, watching his patient sleep. Dawn light filtered through the windows, illuminating motes of dust and the impossible reality before him. Every principle of zoology he'd learned said this creature couldn't exist. Too large for an undiscovered primate in North America, too human-like to have remained hidden, too anatomically distinct to be a hoax. Yet here it lay, breathing, bleeding, healing. Marcus pulled out his phone and began documenting. Photographs from multiple angles, careful not to use flash. Measurements, body length, limb proportions, estimated cranial capacity. He collected blood samples from the gauze used during suturing, sealed them in sterile vials. If he was going to protect this being, he needed data, irrefutable data. The creature stirred around noon, eyes opening slowly. Marcus stood, hands visible, making no sudden movements. The amber gaze fixed on him, then swept the cabin, assessing exits, threats, opportunities. The same calculation Marcus had seen in the eyes of trapped animals, but with an additional layer. Strategy. Easy, Marcus murmured. You're hurt. I fixed what I could, but you need to rest. The creature's attention returned to him. It lifted its right hand, touched its bandaged shoulder gently, then looked at Marcus and made that interrogative sound again. Deeper this time, more complex. A vocalization, not an animal cry. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Yes, I did that, to help you heal. The creature studied him for several seconds. Then, deliberately, it placed its right hand over its heart and made a low, sustained sound. Shifted the hand toward Marcus, repeated the sound with a rising inflection. Marcus understood. I'm Marcus. My name is Marcus. The creature repeated the gesture, pointing at itself, making a new sound. 3 syllables, guttural but clearly intentional. Then it pointed at Marcus, eyes expectant. You want to know my name again? Marcus touched his own chest. Marcus! The creature's mouth moved, struggling with unfamiliar phonemes. Marcus! In that moment, Marcus Webb realized 2 things, with absolute certainty. First, that the scientific understanding of North American megafauna was catastrophically incomplete. Second, that the being before him was not simply an undiscovered species. It was a person. Different, unclassifiable, but undeniably a person, and that changed everything. Marcus established a routine over the next 48 hours, each action careful and transparent. Every time he approached with food, dried fruit, nuts, cooked salmon, he announced himself first, held up the offering, waited for acknowledgement. The creature, whom Marcus had begun thinking of as Kai, the closest approximation to its self-designation he could produce, watched everything with focused intensity. By the second day, Kai was sitting up, testing the injured shoulder with cautious rotations. The wound showed remarkable healing, no signs of infection, edges already beginning to close. Marcus documented this with careful notes and photographs, his training highlighting the anomaly. Healing at this rate suggested immune responses and cellular regeneration more robust than typical mammalian tissue repair. Communication evolved through necessity. When Marcus held up a cup of water, Kai touched its own lips, then gestured drinking. When Marcus cleaned the wound, Kai pointed at the medical supplies, then at Marcus, then made a sweeping gesture encompassing the cabin. A question. Where did these things come from? Marcus tried to explain, with gestures, pointed outside, mimicked driving, pointed to the medical kit. Kai's brow furrowed. Confusion or concentration, Marcus couldn't be sure. But then Kai did something remarkable. It reached for the pencil Marcus had been using for notes and with surprising dexterity began drawing on the back of a patient form. The first sketch was crude but unmistakable. Tall shapes, trees, a smaller figure, Kai, and larger figures, 3 of them, watching. Family, Marcus thought. Kai pointed at the drawing, then toward the forest, then made that interrogative sound. Your family, Marcus said. You want to know if they're safe. Kai stared at him, processing tone more than words. Marcus pulled out his own phone, showed Kai a photograph of himself with his sister taken 2 years ago, pointed at her, then at himself, made a linking gesture. Kai understood. It touched the drawing, made a low, mournful sound, and Marcus felt the weight of separation in that vocalization. Sarah returned on the evening of the second day with supplies, more bandages, fresh food, and deeply troubled news. Sheriff Holbrook's asking questions. The logging company reported their crew saw something unusual that night. One of them took a photograph on his phone, low quality, but clearly something large and bipedal. Holbrook's talking about organizing a search. How long do we have? Maybe 48 hours before he makes it official. Once he does, we'll have volunteers, media, the whole circus. Marcus, I've been doing research. Sarah pulled out a tablet. There are protocols for discovered species, especially large mammals. International Union for Conservation of Nature, Convention on Biological Diversity. If we report this correctly, we might be able to establish protection before a sound interrupted her. Kai, standing now, supporting itself against the wall. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall and, even injured, radiated a presence that filled the small cabin. Sarah froze. "It's okay," Marcus said quickly. "Kai, this is Sarah. She helped me the first night. Remember?" Kai regarded Sarah with those amber eyes, then made a gesture, hand to chest, itself, hand extended toward her. Recognition, hand moving side to side. Question. "It's asking if you're a threat," Marcus translated, amazed at his own certainty. Sarah slowly raised both hands, palms out. "No threat, friend, like Marcus." Kai studied her for a long moment, then nodded once and returned attention to the window, staring into the darkening forest with obvious longing. "It wants to go home," Sarah said quietly. "It can't, not yet. The shoulder needs at least another week to heal properly, and if Holbrook's search parties are out there..." Marcus trailed off, the moral calculus impossible to balance. That night, Marcus attempted more complex communication. He drew a map of the area on paper, marked the cabin, marked the forest, pointed to Kai's drawing of family, then at the forest on the map. Kai watched intently, then took the pencil and marked a location, roughly 15 miles northeast, in old-growth territory so dense even experienced hikers avoided it. "That's where they are?" Marcus asked. "Your people?" Kai made an affirmative gesture. One Marcus had learned meant yes, then drew more figures around the marked location. 8, 9, 10. A small group. Kai then drew another symbol, a structure, possibly a shelter or dwelling. Drew lines radiating from it, paths, maybe territories. Marcus felt his breath catch. "You have a settlement, a community." Kai seemed to struggle with the next concept. It drew a timeline, symbols representing day and night cycles, then marked the current position and drew an arrow pointing forward. 5 cycles, then pointed to itself, pointed to the forest, made a sweeping motion, returning. 5 days, Marcus said. "You're telling me you need to return in 5 days." Kai nodded emphatically, then drew more. Smaller figures, one held by a larger figure. Young ones. Dependents. The mournful sound again, deeper this time, and Marcus understood the desperation. Kai wasn't just separated from family, it was separated from young who depended on it. "We'll figure it out," Marcus promised, though he had no idea how. Sarah spent the next day making discreet inquiries. Sheriff Holbrook had indeed organized a search party for the upcoming weekend, framing it as a public safety patrol to investigate the logging crew's report. Volunteers were already signing up, locals excited by the prospect of Bigfoot hunting, treating it like a combination of sport and spectacle. Meanwhile, Marcus worked with Kai on more sophisticated communication. He showed Kai pictures on his laptop, animals, tools, landscapes, and Kai pointed to those it recognized. Black bear, emphatic affirmative, gesture indicating seen frequently. Elk, same response. When Marcus showed images of chimpanzees and gorillas, Kai studied them with obvious confusion, then pointed at Marcus, then at itself, made a gesture suggesting similarity. "You're saying we're more alike than you and them," Marcus said slowly. Kai nodded, then did something that made Marcus's scientific mind reel. It took the pencil and drew a branching diagram, crude but clearly intentional. One line leading to Marcus's picture, another to itself, both branches connecting to a common point in the past. "Shared ancestry," Marcus breathed. "You're showing me we share a common ancestor." Kai made an affirmative sound, then added more details to the drawing. Time markers, environmental changes, a split in the path. One branch leading to open areas, humans, the other to deep forest, Kai's people. Divergence, adaptation, parallel evolution. Concepts Marcus would have said were impossible for a non-human mind to grasp, let alone communicate. But here was the evidence, drawn in confident strokes by a 7-foot being who shouldn't exist. That evening, Marcus collected more samples: saliva for DNA analysis, hair follicles for microscopic examination. He worked with Kai's permission, explaining each step with gestures. Kai understood, cooperated, even seemed curious about the process. When Marcus examined cells under his portable microscope, Kai leaned in to look, made a surprised sound at the magnified view. Marcus prepared slides from both species, human cheek cells from himself, follicle cells from Kai, and placed them side by side under magnification. The similarities were striking: eukaryotic structure, membrane-bound nucleus, comparable organelle distribution. But there were differences too. Kai's cells showed slightly larger mitochondria, denser chromatin packing, and what appeared to be more robust cell membranes. Kai watched the comparison with focused attention, then pointed at the differences, made an interrogative sound. "Why are we different?" Marcus tried to explain with gestures. Drew environments, showed Kai's people in deep forest, cold, hidden, scarce resources, showed humans in open areas, warm, visible, abundant food. Drew generations passing, bodies adapting. Kai absorbed this, nodded slowly, then drew something else: two figures exchanging objects, sharing a fire. "Contact," Marcus said. "You're saying our peoples have had contact before?" Kai nodded, drew more. Conflicts, then periods of peace, then separation. A history written in simple images, but conveying complex narrative. Marcus photographed every drawing, his mind racing with implications. If these beings had cultural memory of human contact, if they possessed abstract reasoning and historical consciousness, then they weren't simply an undiscovered primate species. They were a parallel hominid lineage, cousins, not curiosities. On the third night, Sarah arrived with devastating news. "Holbrook's moving the search up. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. He's got 25 volunteers, some with hunting dogs. Marcus, we're out of time." Kai understood the tone, if not the words. It stood, tested the injured shoulder, still tender but functional, and moved to the door, clearly intending to leave. "Wait," Marcus said. "It's not safe. They'll be looking for you." Kai turned, those amber eyes meeting his, and Marcus saw the decision already made. Kai gestured: itself, the forest, the drawing of young dependents. No choice. Then Kai did something unexpected. It approached Marcus, placed one massive hand gently on his shoulder, the universal gesture of gratitude, and made a soft sound. "You're thanking me," Marcus said, voice thick. Kai nodded, then touched Marcus's heart, touched its own, and brought the hands together. A bond, recognition of shared humanity perhaps, or simply acknowledgement of the care given and received. Sarah spoke quietly. "If we're going to do this, we need a plan. Holbrook's starting from the logging road, sweeping northeast. If we can get Kai west first, then north through the river valley, it might avoid the search zone." "That's 12 miles of rough terrain," Marcus protested. "With an injured shoulder." Kai made an emphatic gesture. It could do it, had to do it. Marcus made a decision that violated every protocol of his profession, but honored something deeper. "Then I'm guiding you, at least part of the way. I know these forests." They left at midnight, when the moon was a thin crescent and the forest was velvet darkness. Marcus carried a small pack: medical supplies, water, a GPS device set not to record. Kai moved beside him with surprising grace despite the injury, feet finding purchase on terrain that would have challenged experienced hikers, moving with the forest rather than through it. 3 miles in, Kai stopped at a small clearing, knelt and touched the ground, made a complex gesture: gratitude, farewell, something else Marcus couldn't quite pass. Then Kai produced something from a woven pouch Marcus hadn't noticed before, a smooth river stone marked with deliberate grooves. Kai pressed it into Marcus's hand, closed his fingers around it, made that soft sound again. "I'll keep it," Marcus promised, "and I'll keep your secret, all of you." Kai held his gaze for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the forest, with barely a sound. Marcus watched until even the faint sounds of movement faded, then looked down at the stone in his hand. The grooves weren't random. They formed patterns, possibly symbolic. A gift, a message, a promise of memory. He returned to the cabin as dawn broke, Sarah waiting anxiously. "It's done," Marcus said simply. Sarah nodded. "Then we need a story, one that explains the blood, the medical supplies, the time, because Holbrook will ask." They spent the morning constructing their narrative. Marcus had treated an injured black bear, unusually large, with remarkable coloring that might have been mistaken for something else in poor light. The bear had recovered and returned to the wild. All documentation supported this version, carefully edited notes, photographs that showed injury but not species-defining features, blood samples that Marcus would ensure never underwent full genetic analysis. When Sheriff Holbrook arrived that afternoon, gruff and suspicious, Marcus delivered the story with practiced calm, showed the edited documentation, explained the medical intervention, expressed regret that the logging crew had gotten excited over what was ultimately a large bear. Holbrook wasn't satisfied, but he had no evidence to contradict the story. The search found nothing, no tracks, no hair samples, no photographic evidence. Within a week, the incident faded from local conversation, becoming another vague Bigfoot story that no one could verify. Marcus kept the stone on his desk, a reminder of the patient he couldn't report, the person he couldn't acknowledge, the secret he would carry for the rest of his career. 3 weeks passed before Marcus heard the first rumor. A hiker claimed to have found a strange arrangement of rocks near the old growth sector, stones balanced in ways that looked deliberately placed. Then a forestry intern reported seeing large, humanoid tracks near a creek, photographing them before rain washed the evidence away. The images showed clear mid-tarsal breaks, hallux opposability, dermatoglyphics. Marcus felt his stomach tighten when Sarah forwarded him the photos. The intern had posted them on a cryptozoology forum, and they were gaining attention, analyzing, debating, planning expeditions. "We need to contain this," Sarah said when they met at a coffee shop in Forks, voices low despite the noise around them. "If serious researchers start investigating that area, they'll find evidence," Marcus finished, "possibly encounter Kai's people directly." "Would that be so terrible?" Sarah asked quietly. "Marcus, we've been sitting on the most significant anthropological discovery in human history. Maybe it's time." "No!" Marcus's voice was sharp, drawing a glance from the barista. He lowered his tone. "You didn't see how Kai looked at that forest, Sarah, the desperation to return to its young. These aren't curious animals that would benefit from study. They're people who have chosen isolation. Revealing them means destroying the only way of life that's allowed them to survive this long." Sarah looked troubled, but didn't argue. Instead, she shared more concerning news. "Sheriff Holbrook hasn't let this go. He's been making inquiries through state channels, trying to get wildlife officials interested. And there's talk among the deputies. They think I'm covering something up." "Are you?" Marcus asked. "Every single day." Sarah met his eyes. "And it's getting harder. The intern's photos have generated enough buzz that private research groups are planning surveys. Marcus, what if one of Kai's people gets trapped, injured, or worse? What if someone shoots first and asks questions later?" That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He turned the stone over in his hands, tracing the grooves worn into its surface. The patterns suggested intentionality, possibly even language, a writing system so minimal and portable it could be carried in memory across generations. He thought about Kai's drawings, the branching diagram showing shared ancestry, the timeline of contact between their peoples. How long had they been hiding? Centuries, millennia. What had driven them so deep into isolation that even their existence became myth? The answer came 2 days later, when a construction crew, surveying for a new logging access road, found something that made local news: a shallow cave containing what appeared to be deliberate arrangements of objects. Animal bones cleaned and stacked, Fire-marked stones in circular patterns, and most disturbing, what looked like burial sites. Small cairns, carefully constructed, marking what could only be graves. Marcus drove to the site before authorities could cordon it off, Sarah's call having given him a 30-minute head start. What he found made his hands shake. The cave showed clear signs of habitation, not recent, perhaps decades old, but unmistakable. Sleeping areas, food storage, and in the back, a rock face covered with markings. Pictographs, hundreds of them. Stories told in ochre and charcoal, large figures hunting, gathering, caring for young. Scenes of conflict with smaller figures, humans, images of flight, hiding, dwindling numbers, and at the most recent section, Marcus could tell by the freshness of the pigment, a new image. A small figure lying down, a larger figure standing over it, hands extended, and beside them, unmistakably, a human figure. Kai had recorded their encounter, had made it part of the historical narrative of its people. Marcus photographed everything quickly, knowing he had minutes before authorities arrived. The implications were staggering. These beings maintained cultural continuity across generations, preserved history through art, practiced ritual burial, demonstrated abstract symbolic thinking. By any anthropological definition, they met every criterion for personhood, which made what he did next both ethically necessary and legally catastrophic. Marcus gathered the most significant artifacts, 3 marked stones, samples of the ochre pigment, photographs that clearly showed the site's nature, and removed them. Destroyed what evidence he could of the pictographs by carefully applying mud and debris to make them appear natural. It was archaeological vandalism, a violation of his scientific training, and he did it methodically because the alternative was worse. When Sheriff Holbrook arrived with the forestry official 20 minutes later, they found an interesting natural formation, but nothing conclusively unusual. Cave-dwelling animals, Marcus explained, gesturing at the bone arrangements. Black bears primarily. They cache food, and natural erosion patterns in limestone can create what look like deliberate formations. The forestry official, a younger woman named Torres, wasn't convinced. Dr. Webb, those bone arrangements are highly geometric, and these marks on the wall— mineral deposits, Marcus lied smoothly. Iron oxide leaching through the limestone. Common in this region. Holbrook studied him with narrowed eyes. You're awfully quick to explain away everything, Doc. First the bear incident, now this. Starting to wonder if you've got a reason for downplaying things. Just preventing unnecessary excitement over geological formations, Marcus said. But feel free to have a specialist examine the site. I'm sure they'll confirm my assessment. Torres did call in a specialist, a geologist from University of Washington who, lacking the context Marcus had, concluded that while the formations were unusual, they could be explained by natural processes combined with animal activity. The site was documented, photographed, and ultimately deemed interesting but not anomalous. Marcus felt no triumph in the deception, only a heavy weight that seemed to grow heavier each day. Sarah confronted him a week later. Torres showed me the site photos. Those weren't natural formations, Marcus, and the bone arrangements. I've done enough wildlife investigation to know animals didn't do that. No, Marcus admitted, they didn't. So you destroyed evidence, lied to state officials, committed what amounts to obstruction. Sarah's voice was level, but her eyes blazed. Marcus, I've been covering for you, but this is crossing lines I can't uncross. If anyone discovers what you did, what we've been doing, we're not just talking about losing our jobs, we're talking about criminal charges. I know. Marcus felt exhausted. But Sarah, if that site had been properly documented, if it had been recognized for what it really is, what happens next? Research teams, media coverage, public fascination. And then what? These beings have survived by being invisible. The moment they become visible, they become vulnerable. They're already vulnerable, Sarah's control cracked. They're vulnerable to habitat loss, to climate change, to accidental encounters. At least if the scientific community knew, we could establish protections, create reserves, develop protocols for coexistence. Like we've done for indigenous peoples, Marcus interrupted bitterly. Pushed onto smaller and smaller territories, their way of life eroded, their population declining. Sarah, I've been reading the literature. Every time we discover an isolated population, we destroy it. Sometimes through violence, usually through exposure and disease, always through disruption. These beings have made a choice, isolation over extinction. Who are we to override that? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. So we just keep lying? Keep covering up? For how long? I don't know, Marcus admitted. Maybe forever. Maybe until they decide otherwise. The decision came sooner than either expected. 2 months after the cave discovery, Marcus found something on his cabin's doorstep. 3 river stones, arranged in a triangle, each marked with familiar groove patterns, the same geometric style Kai had used. But these stones told a different story. Marcus spent hours decoding them with the help of his photographs of the cave pictographs, cross-referencing symbols. The message was simple, but devastating. Danger, young ones sick, help. His hands shook as he showed Sarah the translation. They're asking for help, medical help. How do you even know how to find them? Sarah asked. Kai marked it on the map, 15 miles northeast. Marcus was already packing supplies. If their young are sick, we're talking about potential population collapse. Sarah, these beings are already critically endangered. If they're facing disease, then we need an actual doctor, Sarah said firmly, not just a veterinarian with good intentions. Marcus, this is beyond your scope. Who do we bring? Who do we trust with this? Marcus felt panic rising. Anyone we involve becomes complicit, and more people means more exposure risk. Dr. Patricia Reeves, Sarah said. She works at the Native American Health Clinic in Near Bay. Discreet, used to working with isolated communities, understands the value of cultural sensitivity. She also happens to be my cousin. Marcus wanted to argue, to maintain the absolute secrecy that had protected Kai's people so far. But Sarah was right. He was a veterinarian, not a pediatrician. If children were dying, they needed someone with proper training. Dr. Reeves proved to be a compact woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. Sarah briefed her carefully, showing only enough evidence to convey urgency without revealing everything. I need you to treat patients in an isolated community, completely off the record. You'll see things that can't be reported. Can you do that? Reeves studied the stone markers, then looked at Sarah steadily. Is this about the Bigfoot sightings? The directness caught them both off guard. Reeves continued, I've lived in the Pacific Northwest my entire life. My grandmother told stories about the forest people, the ones who walked between trees like shadows. She said they were relatives who chose a different path, and we owed them the courtesy of looking away when we saw them. So yes, I can keep secrets. Especially for relatives. They hiked at dawn, Marcus leading based on Kai's map, the route taking them through terrain so difficult it would discourage casual exploration. 8 miles in, they found the first marker, 3 stones balanced impossibly atop each other, the top stone marked with grooves pointing northeast. They're guiding us, Reeves said softly. That's trust. Another 3 miles, and the forest changed. Old-growth cedar, some trunks 15 feet in diameter, canopy so dense that walking felt like moving through a cathedral of green shadow. Marcus spotted more markers, increasingly frequent, until they reached a narrow ravine carved by a creek. And there, partially concealed by overhanging roots and carefully placed branches, was a structure. Not a cave, an actual dwelling. Woven branches formed walls, packed with mud and moss for insulation. The entrance was low, requiring them to duck. Inside, lit by filtered light through smoke holes, Marcus saw what could only be called a home. Sleeping platforms covered with woven mat-like materials, storage areas with baskets, baskets, woven containers, and in the center, a cold fire pit with stones arranged for cooking, and lying on one platform, 3 small forms covered with woven blankets. Kai emerged from the shadows at the back, larger than Marcus remembered, moving protectively toward the young. Then recognition sparked in those amber eyes. Kai made the gesture, hand to heart extended toward Marcus, and added a new gesture toward Reeves. Question, assessment, caution. "She's a healer," Marcus said, pointing to Reeves, then miming medical care. "For your young ones." Kai studied Reeves for several tense seconds, then nodded and moved aside. Reeves approached slowly, hands visible, making soft sounds. The young ones were smaller than Marcus expected, perhaps 3 feet tall, covered in lighter reddish-brown hair, faces heartbreakingly human in their vulnerability. All 3 showed signs of respiratory distress, labored breathing, elevated temperature, lethargy. "Pneumonia," Reeves murmured after a quick examination, "probably bacterial, secondary to viral infection. They need antibiotics, hydration, and fever management." He turned to Kai. "How long have they been sick?" Kai held up fingers, 5 days, then made a downward gesture, "Getting worse." Reeves worked quickly, administering amoxicillin from her field kit, setting up IV drips for the most severe cases, teaching Kai how to maintain hydration. Throughout the process, 2 other adult figures watched from the entrance. More of Kai's people, protective and afraid. Their immune systems may not have encountered common human pathogens, Reeves said quietly to Marcus. "If these are zoonotic spillovers from increasing human-wildlife contact, or if someone contaminated their water source, these populations have no natural immunity. This could be catastrophic." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Like indigenous populations encountering European diseases." Exactly like that. Reeves prepared additional antibiotic courses, explaining to Kai through gestures how to administer them. "They need isolation from human contact, Marcus. Complete isolation. Whatever protection you've been giving them, it needs to be absolute." They stayed for 6 hours, Reeves monitoring the young ones until their fevers broke and breathing stabilized. During that time, Marcus observed the dwelling more carefully. Tools hung from the walls, hafted stone points, wooden implements, a primitive but effective drilling mechanism. Baskets containing preserved foods, dried berries, smoked meat, something that might have been pemmican. And in one corner, carefully protected, more marked stones recording history. One of the other adults, smaller, possibly female, approached cautiously and offered Marcus something, a carved wooden bowl, the interior polished smooth, the exterior marked with geometric patterns, a gift unmistakably. Marcus accepted it with both hands, bowing his head in a gesture of respect. The adult made a soft sound, gratitude perhaps, or acknowledgement of the debt now owed. As they prepared to leave, Kai walked them to the ravine's edge. Marcus tried to explain the danger they faced. More humans exploring, logging operations expanding, the cave discovery that had nearly exposed them. Kai listened, then made a complex series of gestures Marcus had learned meant we know and we adapt. The being pointed into deeper forest, made a walking gesture, a long journey. They would move again, as they had moved countless times before. Marcus felt something break inside him. "How much longer can you keep running?" Kai regarded him with those ancient amber eyes, then made a gesture Marcus hadn't seen before. 2 paths diverging, one staying visible, humans, one fading into shadow, Kai's people, and then a sweeping motion. "This is our choice, our path." On the hike back, Reeves was quiet until they reached the halfway point. Then she spoke. "Those beings have language, technology, family structures, and medical knowledge. I saw herbal poultices on the young ones before we arrived. They're not animals, Marcus. They're people, and they're dying." "I know. So what's the plan? Keep hiding them until habitat loss or disease finishes what we started. Watch them dwindle until there aren't enough for a viable population." Reeves's voice was fierce. Or do we fight for them, establish protections, create reserves, give them a chance? They don't want to be found, Marcus said. Kai made that clear. We reveal them, we destroy them. We might destroy them, Reeves corrected. But we also might save them. Right now, you're choosing certain slow extinction over possible survival. That's not protection, Marcus. That's abandonment. Her words haunted him during the weeks that followed. The young ones recovered. Kai left a marker stone confirming this, but Reeves's challenge remained. Was he protecting these beings, or simply avoiding the hard choices their survival required? The answer came from an unexpected source. Sheriff Holbrook requested a meeting at his office, and Marcus arrived expecting confrontation. Instead, he found Holbrook sitting across from Deputy Torres and Sarah, a folder open on the desk. "Dr. Webb," Holbrook began without preamble, "I'm going to be straight with you. The logging company wants to expand operations into the Northeast Territory, the same area where we've had all these unusual sightings. They've filed for permits, and barring environmental objections, they'll be approved." Marcus felt his stomach drop. That area is old growth, ecologically sensitive, which is why I'm talking to you. Holbrook leaned forward. "Torres here thinks we should recommend a biological survey before approving the permits. Says there might be endangered species in that territory that would complicate development. Now, normally I'd think she's stalling. But I've been a sheriff in these parts for 23 years, and I've learned to trust when something doesn't add up." He pulled out photographs. The cave site, the logging road incident, the intern's track photos. Individually, these are nothing. Collectively, they suggest something living in those woods that we haven't properly documented. Something that might have legal protections if we knew what it was. Marcus's mind raced. Holbrook was offering a way forward, environmental protection, without requiring direct revelation. But it would require lying again, creating false documentation, possibly involving more people in the cover-up. Sarah spoke quietly. "Or we could tell the truth." The room went silent. Holbrook's eyes narrowed. "What truth would that be, Deputy Chen?" Sarah looked at Marcus, a question in her eyes. He thought of Kai's gesture, two paths diverging. A choice. He thought of the young ones struggling to breathe, of a people reduced to hiding in ever-shrinking forest, of extinction approaching one logging permit at a time. He thought of the carved bowl on his shelf, the marked stones, the pictographs recording encounters across generations. A people who had survived by being invisible, who were now running out of places to hide. "The truth," Marcus said slowly, "is that area contains archaeological and biological resources of extreme significance, resources that would require federal protection under multiple statutes. But documenting them properly would require cooperation from various agencies, strict confidentiality agreements, and a commitment to non-intrusive study. It wasn't the full truth, but it was enough truth to start." Holbrook studied him for a long moment. "You're saying there's something out there worth protecting?" "Yes, something that's been here far longer than we have, something that deserves the right to exist without disruption. Can you prove it?" Marcus thought of the evidence he'd collected, the documentation he'd hidden. "I can provide enough evidence to justify a moratorium on development pending proper survey. What happens after that depends on how seriously we take our responsibility to protect what we find." Torres spoke up. "I can recommend the biological survey through official channels. It'll buy us time at least, maybe 6 months, possibly a year." "And in that time?" Holbrook asked, looking directly at Marcus. "We establish protocols," Marcus said. "Create a framework for protection that doesn't require full disclosure. Buffer zones, restricted access, environmental monitoring. The same tools we use for endangered species applied carefully." Holbrook leaned back, studying all three of them. "You're asking me to help hide something significant enough that you've been lying to me for months." "I'm asking you to help protect something," Marcus corrected. "Something that can't protect itself anymore." The sheriff was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. "I'll support the survey recommendation. But Webb, If this comes back on us, if whatever you're hiding causes problems down the line, I'll remember this conversation. Understood. As Marcus left the office, Sarah caught up with him. We just bought time, not a solution. Eventually, someone will demand answers. I know. Marcus looked toward the mountains, toward the forest where Kai's people were preparing to move again, to fade further into shadow. But maybe time is enough. Maybe we give them space to decide their own future, to come forward if they choose, or to keep walking their path if that's what survival requires. And if they go extinct while we wait? Marcus had no answer for that. Some questions had no good answers, only choices between inadequate options. That night, he added a new entry to his private journal, the one he kept encrypted and hidden, the record he would leave for whoever came after him. The Kai people, my designation lacking their actual ethnonym, represent a parallel hominid lineage that has survived through deliberate isolation. They possess language, technology, culture, and abstract reasoning. They are by any meaningful definition persons, and they have chosen invisibility over integration. This choice may lead to their extinction, but it is their choice to make, not ours to override. Our responsibility is to protect that choice for as long as they wish it maintained, to remember them, to honor them, and to ensure that if they fade from the world, they do so with dignity rather than as specimens or spectacles. This is not science. This is ethics. And sometimes the most important thing a scientist can do is close the notebook and walk away. Marcus closed his laptop and looked at the marked stone on his desk, the carved bowl beside it. Artifacts of a people the world would never acknowledge. Treasures that represented the most significant anthropological discovery and most profound secret he would ever keep. Outside, the forest whispered in the wind, keeping its own counsel, sheltering its own mysteries. And somewhere in that vast green darkness, Kai's people prepared for another migration, another adaptation, another generation of survival earned through vigilance and sacrifice. Marcus would keep their secret for as long as it took, for however long they needed. It was, he thought, the least one person could do for another. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing to support more speculative fiction that explores the boundaries between science, ethics, and the unknown. Your engagement helps bring these hidden narratives to light.